when I want to talk about, right, using the Haggadah to plan an amazing Seder. Um, I will admit to you, and this will not be shocking, that some of what I'm going to share to you is, in some ways, well, it's not. It's not that these sort of strategies and approaches are unique to sort of to my Haggadah. It is more that these are things that I think about, and uh, in designing my own Haggadah, they are some of the things that I wanted. I thought that an effective book could facilitate. So I'm not gonna sort of talk about sort of offer like fun creative activities that you haven't thought of and that you can. That's not really my area of specialty. What I want to think about is how to think about the liturgy of the Haggadah, and planning out this kind of ritual in a way that will kind of be meaningful and rich. So I have basically four pieces I want to touch on. And so we'll look at each of those four, and then there are two songs that I want to share with you at the end that are both just inherently awesome songs, and well, I think capture some what I'm of what I'm saying about finding some of the inherent meaning in this liturgy and really kind of bringing it out in a very personal way. I'm going to stop my share there so that I can switch to sharing this. So the first thing, actually, you know what? I take that back. I'm being indecisive. The first thing that I want to talk about is an idea that is not limited to the Seder. It is something that I talk about and I teach in relationship to all kinds of liturgy. And it's under the sort of general rubric of the division between keva and kavanah, where keva is the kind of the fixed, the fixed sort of like text and ritual of any service, and kavanah is kind of the meaning making and the intention and whatever. We tend to think of keva as the kind of the compulsories or the obligatory, the motions, and kavanah as kind of the kishkas and the neshama. And therefore the keva is the kind of framework, but kavanah is what's really meaningful. And I want to challenge kind of that way of thinking about it. And so there's a sort of very sort of widely known and widely taught discussion in the Talmud and Masechet Brachot that asks the question of where do our tefillot, the 3 times a day tefillot, come from? And the Talmud presents 2 sources that offer these competing theories. One is that the three daily tefillot were established by the patriarchs, right, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the other that they are based on the sacrificial service in the temple. And it offers for Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, there's a verse, there's a moment in each of their lives that is said to correspond to a moment of calling out to God, of reaching out to God, that is seen as a moment of prayer. And Abraham, there's one of these prayer moments that happens to be in the morning, and Yitzchak, there's a prayer moment that happens to be in the afternoon, and Yaakov in the evening. And it all works out kind of very nicely, except, of course, that we know that the patriarchs there's certainly no indication that the patriarchs engaged in any kind of regular prayer, and certainly the moments that are sort of depicted in this text as establishing prayer are once in a lifetime moments, right? As opposed to the sacrificial rituals, which were daily. Not only were they daily, they were very structured and very prescribed. And the value in priests performing the sacrificial rituals in the temple was in being precise and following the steps exactly as mandated. Now, when we talk about the temple and sacrifices, the initial kind of instinct reaction is often a kind of distaste of like animal sacrifices being a little barbaric and sort of a reflection of an ancient culture that we really have trouble relating to. And there are certain, I mean, and I imagine if we were to witness sort of, and there are people there are places in the world where one can do this, sort of a ritual animal sacrifice, it would uh, it would feel very strange. However, the word that it really describes temple sacrifice, the temple rituals is avodah, and avodah is also the word that we use to describe prayer, right? And the thing is that avodah, oved means to work, and eved is a servant, right? And so avodah really means service. So the fact that in the temple it was sacrificial service is, for us certainly, almost beside the point, because temple worship was first and foremost service. It was focused on honoring and serving God. It was not focused on ourselves and our needs. And it was really the act of devotion that was critical, right? To say that it's sort of clear that like we wouldn't say that God needs the food of the sacrifices. They certainly didn't think, even the ancient Israelites wouldn't have said that. The point is that these rituals were an act of service, an act of devotion, an act of love, and that the specific content was not so important. Now, that's actually I found that to be a really helpful frame for thinking about our tefillah rituals. Because if you pray on a daily basis, it is hard to sort of feel, if you feel like prayer is only authentic prayer when you have something heartfelt that you're crying out about, that you need to share with, right? You can't possibly have authentic prayer every day. In fact, the notion of regular mandated prayer would be almost contradictory. But a big part of prayer is an act of love and of service and of devotion. It's really in the way that we actually use the word service in exactly this way, right? Right, like doing like a service corps, right? Or like people who are, is where we are focused on roles that can be helpful to those in need. So one part of what I want to say about the Seder ritual is some of the time you need to have some moments that really are kavanah, that really are about stopping at a place at a text in the Hagaddah, stopping at a particular moment in your ritual, and really, whether it's exploring, discussing, sharing, playing, really having moments of real connection. And also, there are some some of the time, it's really helpful to think about like reciting the liturgy of the Seder as being a performance ritual, which is not always about the specific content. It's about a way of honoring and observing this the holiday, right? So um, I feel like because we don't just distinguish between these two, it's either it all becomes like one big long rich, sort of like undifferentiated recital, or we cut out everything that doesn't feel um, like we can really connect to it in this kind of very personal way. And it shouldn't we shouldn't have to do one or the other, right? There should be some pieces um, of real creativity, of real connection, and and there should be some times where you're in a mode of like, yeah, now we're going to recite some of the text because this is, among other things, a ritual performance. Look, the whole theme of the Seder is um, remembering the all of the times of hardship and fear and uncertainty that we've come through, and celebrating God's sort of leading us through those and into redemption and into uh, better times. So that's idea number one, to really sort of give time to each of those modes. I'm gonna the second thing, and here I'm going to go back to sharing my little PDF. Although you also have this, so you can be flipping through yourself. But um, uh, right, you're now looking at the Haggadah. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Um, One thing I did that uh, it's funny how you never know how people are going to react to this. There are people. This is one of the things that I've had some people like really like really you did this, and other people are like, why didn't everybody do this? Um, I put in a little guide to shortening your seder, which people don't usually associate with a traditional Haggadah. Um, it, it is something that sort of, if you remember, like during COVID, lots of people who maybe wouldn't otherwise have done this, like started. If you need to like cut down your seder to only however much time, um, here's a way to do it. Like here are the highlight things, the thing, right? Um, I've continued to be a believer in um, abbreviating, um, partially because um, not and this is true of every liturgy. I can take you through the Siddur, and you know, and this is true all over the place. It's certainly true in the Haggadah, right? Not all pieces of liturgy are equally meaningful or equally important. Um, that is not heretical to say. It is simply a thing to be aware of and to account for. So um, uh, therefore, what are the essentials? What are the essentials? Well, there are two kinds of essentials. There are the things that are the most important. There are certain things. There are certain parts of the Seder that is like not fully a Seder if you haven't done hit these few key things. Um, and right, part of the reason that I sort of did this is to sort of identify some of the things. So importance is one aspect of being essential, and familiarity is the other. Right? If I'm sort of abbreviating certain parts of Haggard, I'm going to make sure to hit the most sort of defining critical text, and I'm going to make sure to read the text that I know people are going to recognize. And right, so over the years, I feel like we have said in my family everything that we're going to say about the four children. I could skip the four children, honestly. But I'm never going to because people need the four children, right? But what I am going to do, um, I've tried over the last couple of years to not like because there are all of these different interpretations of the four children, people and everyone's heard an interpretation, right? People start to like, oh, I heard this thing, I heard this thing, all wonderful. But if we get if we go down the rabbit hole of the four children, we're never going to get to other things that I think are more interesting and more important and potentially more meaningful. Um, so part of making choices is what are the things that one could skip and not, but also thinking one thing to decide in advance and to let people know is when you want to be in reciting mode and when you want to dwell, right? So you know, it's funny because when I hand people the Haggadah and they start looking at it, and people start looking from the first page, and so like somebody's going to be holding the Haggadah for like a minute and a half, and they spend half that time looking at the note on transliterations and the Seder plate, and like, well, no, the thing I was trying to show you was actually that, right? So even literally when I show people the book, they make this mistake. Um, uh, right? Avadim Hayinu is like I think I would say for me like the four answers, and we talked about this. Uh, we talked about it last session, right? There, right, after the four questions, there are these four different answers, right? And they are each of them is critical. They're the things to not only make sure you hit, but the things to spend time talking about and exploring and thinking about how do they help, because those are the sort of frames, the narratives that are going to help us to try to see ourselves and our own experiences reflected in and connected to the Exodus, connected to the Jewish past, and connected to the larger network of the Jewish people. Right? Those are the places where there is the space to be creative in thinking about the story, and be personal in thinking about and sharing our own stories. Um, and there are other things, right? You know, people, you know, because at the beginning, people easily get bogged down with the story of the five rabbis and this Mishnah about that kind of got in here by accident because it involves the same guy. Um, uh, this Mishnah just here because Elzar ben Azariah shows up here, and then we have another story about him that's sort of connected to Passover. Well, it's connected at least to the Exodus. Right, for children. Here you have the second answer, right? And for me, right, this text, Behisha Amda, that idea, the promise not of bringing us to sort of permanently, out of slavery in one moment, but of constantly seeing us through hardships. That for me is a critical moment, right? The verses of the third answer are so important. Um, The Midrash, one can read through it. That when I do read through it is more of a, is more in reciting mode. Uh, Everyone's going to think Dayenu. I actually have Dayenu has grown on me so much over the years. I think I mentioned this at the very end last time. I've learned so much about Dayenu by sitting with it, and I feel like I've kind of redeemed it for myself after like a lifetime of thinking that it was kind of ridiculous. But Rabbi Gamliel, right? Um, the idea of merging the eating, the physical experience and the telling into sort of a single mitzvah, a single sort of merged, multi-sensory act. Um, and when you when you have those kind of high points, and okay, these are my critical points. These are the points where, and hopefully, this is where I sort of one of my goals in this Haggadah, and it's something that it's something that for which the Haggadah is it can hope I think be helpful. It's something that one can also do just do without it, but the idea that like I begin the section by identifying those four answers, giving each a name. When you get to each of the answers, right, you'll see at the bottom of the page here and bottom here, right, it's really sort of how those answers frame our story is really focused. You'll notice the introduction. This will not surprise you, given how I've talked about it. The introduction to the Midrash section is primarily about the four verses themselves and not really about the Midrash. Because that's what really draws me. But being able to see, oh, in this long kind of stretch of Magid, these are the moments that I want to really have the time to explore. And I want to have a couple sentences, a two-sentence version of what's unique about this, right? About this answer. Right? I don't want to like sort of, this is some of the stuff we talked about last week, but a couple sentences, what's unique about this answer, so that, right, for me, right, the idea that in this framing, we, the imagined, the Israelites bringing their first fruits to the temple, were just sort of describing themselves as the endpoints, the sort of the pinnacle of that grand Israelite narrative, right? And that we see ourselves as being the telos, right? The guiding the guiding purpose, the guiding goal of so much of the journey that our ancestors traveled was so that we could be here, right? And therefore we are really we're the culmination of so much of that story. It's a great place to invite people to tell their stories, and it is easy to get to this point and already feel like, oh, we've been doing this for a while. We got to hurry up a little bit, right? Don't hurry. Don't let poor time. Right? This is something I tell myself when I teach all the time. Don't let poor time management be the determiner of which parts of the Haggadah you spend time exploring and inviting people to talk about, and which ones you have to kind of like let slip by. because some of the richest moments are in the latter part of this section. The right after Rabbi Gamliel, right, the fourth answer, we get to what for me is like this moment of transition, right? The summary of sort of the guiding idea of all of Magid, right? Seeing ourselves as if we had been, as if we personally had been redeemed. I want to make sure to feel like I have the time to stop here and really try to enter that experience. And to do that, I have to have been planning to make sure that I have the time. When you talk about essentials, not letting Hallel slip. Hallel, the little bit of Hallel that we have before the meal, getting to at least a little bit of the rest of Hallel that comes after the meal completes your Seder. It both completes the Seder in terms of being texts that are full of joy, and that we often sing them with melodies that are full of joy. That are full of joy. They are Hallel is truly the note that the Seder is meant to end on, right? If you don't sing Hagaddah, I will forgive you. Anyone else? I can't speak. I can't speak for Kadosh Baruch Hu, but you'll be okay in my book. But if you kind of disband at the end of the meal and never get to at least a Hallel, I would feel sad. So that was point number 2. Was be thoughtful about, abbreviate so that you can the Seder can feel meaningful and not rushed. But be thoughtful about what you're choosing to spend time on, starting from the beginning, so that you have time for the things later on that you want to emphasize. That was 2. 3. I'm a big believer in letting the text be your frame, and this gets back to like the like one of the reason that, like, here I have these 4 answers kind of really each of them set off, right? Other texts in Magid are just some of the texts in the, but each of those answers is set off, is given a title, is given an introduction, is right, and is given a frame. Think about those frames. The frame of going in a moment from slavery, from oppression to freedom, getting out, and not looking back. The frame of Abraham being brought from idolatry to this close relationship to God, Yaakov and his children going back into exile, right, and then being brought close to God. That cycle repeating itself, each in different ways through the generations. And then, of course, the declaration of the first fruits. Think about how each of these invites us to tell our stories, to think about and relate to our stories. these are the four answers are different ways of thinking about what it means to be redeemed and what redemption is for. But all of them focus on celebrating our stories, and I want I'm gonna emphasize this especially in a moment where there seems not to be, or it feels like there's more to worry about than to celebrate. The Haggadah liturgy is focused on celebrating our stories, appreciating the gift and the moments of redemption that we have been so fortunate to experience, um, and to find personal connections. How do I feel redeemed? How am I connected to the arc of Jewish history and Jewish peoplehood? Two sort of more concrete things about this. I've always found it. I, I like to, and I sort of talk to people about this a lot. Invite people to share their experiences, to share whether it's moments, of of transition for them and their families, moments of realization or understanding for them and their families. Um, Invite people to share their stories and invite other people to be curious and ask questions. The Seder is not a great time because we have this image of the five rabbis sitting around all night. Right? If you imagine, like, if you think about five rabbis steeped in Torah learning sitting around the night discussing something, you imagine them debating, arguing, gesticulating, right? That. And then they gesticulate, and then Zoom thinks that they're raising their hands, right? Um, uh, that's how I always pictured it. Because otherwise, what took all night, right? And weirdly, that shapes in this sort of unconscious way how people think the Seder is supposed to kind of go. Seder's not a great setting for debate per se, especially because who knows kind of who you have around the table, um, especially if you have people who don't know each other well, and especially in a time when um, debate about um, anything present day very easily uh, turns tension filled. Um, but the theater is supposed to be about celebrating our stories um, and sharing our journeys. And the other thing, and this gets back to something I said about kids, but it's actually true for adults too. Give people jobs. So this is something that this is one of those other things that I really tried to make easy. And I will show you like how I do it just using this book. But you can the same principle applies if you have different people around the table with different books, or kids with their picture books, and adults with different kinds of the commentaries or little stories or whatever it is. Um, Ask people to look for things in their Haggadah, something that they can that if they noticed something, if they read something that like is curious or they never thought of, to share. Um, have people looking for stuff to share. Um, One of the things I think I mentioned is that each of the comments here in my Haggadah is intentionally short enough that you can read it in the time it takes to recite the text on this page. if one person is reciting, right, or the text of the four children, right, and the time that it takes for me to read, etc., you can read the little tiny paragraph on the bottom of the page. And hopefully, if I've done my job well, there's something that you hadn't thought of. Well, at least the first time you read it, right? Something you hadn't thought of, like, and maybe it's something that, like, I didn't know this, or do you think that's true? Or is this Rabbi Cahan guy a crackpot? Who knows? Um, each of the, if any of you is using this Hagaddah, you have kids, especially, I mean, maybe not 5-year-olds, but a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old at your table, you can tell them from me that every single one of these pictures of these drawings has something there that's not obvious at first glance. Invite them to find it. We talked a little bit about the lions last time, right? Did we talk about the lions? Did we talk about the lions? Don't remember.
Yes, I think we did.
Yeah, I think we did. Right. The lions are sort of turned sideways, both to kind of embrace the text and also to evoke the seal of Jerusalem. The dots here. Originally, we actually, in the beta edition, we actually had we didn't have any of the art yet, but my designer put in sort of graphics to fill the spaces that the art was going to go in, and it was all geometric shapes. But so we had sort of across the whole bottom of the page, we had sort of starting from 2 big dots to 4 to, and kind of a sort of geometric, expansion and some geometric growth of the number of dots until it was like they were so small that you couldn't really count them, to kind of capture the idea that's in this text right here, of the kind of exponential growth of the Jewish people from this small family to 200 years later, this nation of hundreds of thousands of people. I actually had my this is one of those where my fantasy for this piece was ended up looking terrible, and we had to do something else. But I had this fantasy of a picture of 2 escalators, right, with a couple people coming down the escalator, looking bedraggled and in rags, whatever, and kind of looking to the side and noticing a huge gaggle of people going on the up escalator, who were all sort of happy and excited over it, but seemed to look the same. So like the people coming down are kind of seeing the future, their future selves, meaning they're like their great grandchildren who are going to be coming back up this way, but having grown into this nation. But you can see a little bit of that. And I could take you through that with every one of the pictures, with every one of the drawings in the right. And I invite the kids who I invited last year, like the kids at our table, to find the kind of hidden and the hidden elements of those images, and to share what they found. So when they notice one of those things, wow, like check out that, right, they can be looking for those things to share, while we go through the Seder. Okay. That was number three. And the last thing, and I want to have time for our song. In every generation, we see ourselves as if we personally had been redeemed. Seder is a celebration. It's personal, and it is supposed to be upbeat and positive. It's about, right? It is the biggest contradiction, like in terms of, like the Holocaust theme Sedarim, and even like in the 70s and 80s, um, uh, every Haggadah had to have a sort of a Holocaust section. But the Seder is really about celebrating redemption. And aside from just sort of remembering that, right? Celebrating redemption has a momentum. It has an energy. It has a sense of a precious moment, a sense of joy. Think of the journey from the four questions to the end when we say, because we feel this way, we can't help but bursting out in song. Think of it as building its intensity, not as we're getting tired and losing it. I tend to sort of get a little more hyper and a little more sort of emphatic with each of the texts as we go, building up to this moment of we see ourselves as being personally redeemed, and we gotta sing. When I transition to Hallel, I'm loud. Not everyone appreciates it, but mostly they do, I think. I, whether it's in the moments of telling the stories and Dayenu, whether it's in singing those first bits of Hallel, shout it out, sing, be joyful, be silly, be dramatic. The worst thing to have at the Seder is decorum. Ugh, right? It's right. The great thing about the Seder is you're home. Nobody's watching you, or at least that you know of. Be bombastic. Convey to people at your Seder, this is a time to really be awash in all the blessings, be awash in how far we have come individually as a people, how much more we have to grow and to build and to give to the world. And right, and when you've had already a few cups of wine and you get to the songs after the Seder, right, then inhibitions should be gone and you can just annoy. I live in an apartment building. There's so many people that we can annoy by singing loudly. It is truly the joy of freedom. um, um, but building that energy and making it a celebration, that is my last thing, right? That finding the times for keva, for reciting and performance and ritual, and the times for kavana, for finding meaning, exploring, sharing, right? Abbreviating carefully and thoughtfully, using the time, making sure that you emphasize the parts that are most important to you. Letting the text be your frame. There are these different framings of what it's about. They are really, it's a, there are different Seder guides, but if you read it right, the Haggadah itself is actually the best guide there is. Really about how to think of our stories and how to read ourselves into this story and build the energy, the joy, the excitement through Magid into the meal, into Hallel. It can carry you to the very last song. And with that, I have two last songs that I want to share with you well, because you got to do it. Let's see. Here they are. Share sound. All right. You're going to tell me if you can hear this properly. Um, I mentioned this. Maybe I mentioned this last week. The third answer, the one that that's about bringing the first fruits of the temple and seeing ourselves as the pinnacle of our ancestry journey. Tell me if you're hearing this, or I will what? Wait, wait. Oh, come on. What happened to my, what? Okay. That is very strange. I do have a Spotify account connected to my Google account. I do not know why it is giving me a hard time. That is very strange. Okay. It's not working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you, because I can seemingly in the 3 minutes that I have left, I cannot figure out why my computer is not playing the two songs that I want to play for you. So I'm going to share with you this little PowerPoint. The last two slides are the two songs I wanted to share with you, and so I invite you to listen to one is the Sweet Honey in the Rock song, "We Are Our Grandmother's Prayers, We Are Our Grandfather's Dreamings," and the other old Irish hymn that really is for the moment when we transition to Hallel. How can I keep from singing? And I'm in 1 second going to share the. I'm going to share them the PowerPoint with you, and you can find those here. Here. I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, why it won't. Here. One is here, and the other one I'm just. Is here. I'm gonna. They're really just beautiful and powerful ways to kind of bring and again all of this, like they're these beautiful, rich moments in the Haggadah that it's worth finding ways to bring out, to highlight, to spotlight. Both because it makes for because they're beautiful, it makes for beautiful moments, and I think this is, if I had to sort of sum up the theme of everything that I've shared with you over the last 3 weeks, it is that the Haggadah as a liturgy is a rich and nuanced and contoured ritual, and the book that you're using should highlight that and bring it out. And the way you approach planning and leading your Starim should highlight and bring that out. It will make the time that you're sitting around that table feel like it passes so much more quickly. And like it is like you're floating through this ritual that maybe in past years has felt long. Uh, I feel I have uh, filled my time. Uh, if there are if there are thoughts, questions, yeah, please.
So I just, people have different experiences. And after over 6 decades of going to Seder's, I learned something last year that for me, what totally changed the way I thought of, drum roll, the 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
And given what you said, I just thought I would share it. And this I
Okay.
attribute to Rabbi Joel Rembaum,
Okay.
who I've been learning with. And we were looking at a piece of text and he was talking about all the meanings of Tom. This wasn't about Pesach,
Right.
but it made me look up Tom in a concordance, and it totally changed my valuation of the hierarchy. I think from when we're, at least me, from when a little kid, this is the one you want most to be like, and the way you say, I most want to be like this, I least want to be like this.
Yeah.
And it totally upended which I put first.
Okay.
So anyway, I just thought I'd say that when you said you thought, at least for you, the 4 children had been thoroughly plumbed. How's that for
I'm absolutely willing to concede that there are always new insights, and there are reasons why the 4 children are always draw our attention. I just think there are we when we get caught up in it, we always I always end up frustrated at the things that I really want to dive into that we don't get to. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, the 2 links you set up give you a list of your songs. It's the second one is a whole bunch of Pete Seeger, and the first one.
Well, it's supposed to. It called up a list of songs by Pete Seeger, but like one of them is "How Can I Keep From Singing."
Ah,
That's the one. That's the one I was supposed to play.
and what was the other one?
The other one is called "We Are" by Sweet Honey in the Rock. I could probably find
it's actually. I apologize. That's the first. It's the first one listed.
Right. So those are the 2 songs. They're I don't mean I could like find a YouTube video or whatever, but
Yes. Good night.
Uh,
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
but other thoughts, other close, so I will just close by saying, I mean, it's been a pleasure being able to kind of share some of my own learning about the Haggadah with you, to share my Haggadah with you. I sort of kind of hope you enjoyed getting the chance to kind of wander through it. And for me, the hope is that that a different book will, a book that sort of like gives that ritual shape will allow you to sit down with your family and feel like you have you have a ritual where everyone is on board, everyone is following what's happening, and where that it's where your ritual follows the shape and contours of the liturgy. I think it it can be really enriching, and it will be, I promise, a lot less frustrating. For you and for other people around the table. And with that, I thank you, and I wish you a really wonderful and meaningful Pesach, and a little refuge from the storm of the world.